So this is my research. I conducted primary and secondary research throughout the investigation for my thesis. For primary, I used a mix of surveys and focus groups. The survey was gave some interesting results as the result pool was only about 20 candidates. And so, of course, that's not really a large audience to be. At the time, I wasn't too sure if the results I was getting was going to help with the point I was trying to make within the thesis. So after writing the thesis, I realized that the results that I got actually backed up the points that I was making quite significantly. Um, and so overall, it really helped with the delivery of the thesis. One thing that didn't necessarily go to plan was one of the questions that I had right at the beginning was do you watch Twitch? And if you responded to no to that, the form was supposed to end and then not consider any more of your answers. Um, but rather than that, the form kept going and people would have to still answer. Um, so the results from that uh, varied to the results for other questions, and so I had to export all my answers into an Excel spreadsheet and one by one consider each of their responses to each question. It didn't take too much time, and it eventually changed the results slightly, but not enough to make a significant difference. Um, I'd say if I was to do this again, I would probably focus more on specific questions that will prompt answers that would benefit the thesis more. Because I think a few of the questions I had were kind of just filler questions without realizing it. Um, so I just need to put in more thought as to what questions I'm asking. As for the focus group, I'd say this was probably the most important part of my research. Um, it influenced almost all of the thesis. Not necessarily influenced the thesis, but more the general points that were being made within the thesis. Um, I'm very happy with the way that the referencing worked as well, and the overall product that the thesis came out with. But if I was to do it again, I would probably focus on staying on topic because I feel like a couple of areas that I dove into within the thesis kind of sidetracked a little and didn't really help with the main point. Um, so that's definitely something that I'll have to bear in mind if I was to do this again. Um, so then the practicals for my logo, I started with this one here, and although I liked it and it's quite a funky looking logo, it just didn't really suit me as a brand. Um, and so I experimented with a couple of different ways of writing out Leatrix, but it didn't really. I couldn't really find a way to do it. So I thought it may be easier if I just stick to trying to do something with the L of Leatrix. So eventually I came across these ideas, and I really liked the whole shattered L idea. As it quite with the blue, it just really suits the kind of aura I give as a brand. So of course I fine-tuned it a little. Um, and this shatter map here was for when I was editing in After Effects. I had to have each part of the L in a different color in order for After Effects to register it as different shapes. Otherwise, it would have it was a way of masking them. So then that way they could be used within the effect. The effect was a shatter effect, and I put it in reverse, and that turned out really good with the whole animation. The cutaways task was honestly a really fun task for me. It allowed me to just experiment with new camera angles, whilst not really having to think about what's happening. It was just a nice fun task to just practice using a camera and experimenting with different shot types and which one works well and which one doesn't. I'd say a few of the shots, of course, didn't turn out as well as I wanted them to because of lighting and just general issues with the way it was produced. But overall, I'd say it was a very fun task to do. This was a particular favorite shot of mine since it goes into the next. That shot was really hard to do because, of course, I didn't want to burn the camera in boiling water. A lot of the shots I had to, because I accidentally did them in a portrait manner, I had to blur, like, have two layers of them and blur the background one so it didn't look plain. Onto the freelance stuff. This was interesting to look over, since, of course, I need to think about what kind of field I want to go into, whether it, within the media industry. And the type of jobs is just always good to know, since it will allow me to I'll be able to make sure I'm looking for the right work. Otherwise, I would have no idea. Freelance is probably the one that interests me most, since it allows me to work within my own hours and do exactly my own work. When doing the research for the employment opportunities and stuff, it took some time to actually think of the different types of jobs and why they need certain skill sets. But a lot of it does kind of come with common knowledge, if that makes sense. And then finding employment, of course, that's always useful to know, since I want to, I need to be able to know where to find jobs. If I was to do this differently, I'd probably, the way that I've organized my research is probably the way that I'd do it differently, because I feel like this is just big chunks of words, and if you're trying to find specific parts of research within this, it's just going to be very difficult to actually find what you're looking for. But overall, I'd say with the research that I've done, it was definitely beneficial to the knowledge I needed. So I'd say this was probably the most in-depth research that I've done for a while. Since the whole tax section was all new to me. Starting with the resources. This was kind of just, I thought about what I'd want as a freelancer, and then kind of just added them all in one by one. A couple of these are for other fields of media, so of course I'd prefer a PC to a MacBook, but of course I'd still list it. It's good to know these type of things, and I'm definitely glad that I included it. The types of legal statuses is definitely something that I need to know as a freelancer, since if I want to go into this field of freelance, then I'll need to know what type of business I'm going to be running, if that makes sense. And of course, sole trader sounds the best to me, since I do like working alone, and that always seems to work best for me whenever I work alone. If I was to do this part differently, I'd probably research more into what kind of work ethic you'll be working under with these type of legal statuses, since it's this is just basic information, but if you had why or how you work in these type of businesses, I guess, then it would definitely help influence the decision of someone more. The taxes, I'm very glad that this is something that I had to research, since I had zero idea of, everything involved, but now I'd say I have a very good knowledge of how taxes work, and even if I did forget some of it, I could easily just come back here and look at what I wrote. If I was to do it again, I'd probably, because whenever researching taxes, I found it a very mundane task with, because everything is just blocks of information. So if I found a way to somehow make the information more interesting to look at, then that would have been useful to do. VAT as well, that was something I had some kind of knowledge on, like very minimal, but it's good to properly know how that works now. So these are all my paperwork. The skills audit was good to look into, since I wasn't too sure, like exactly what skills I had. Of course, I knew in my head what skills I had, but I couldn't put them into words at first. So it's good to properly sit down and think about that. And of course, the layout that it gives you is just interesting to have. For the finance, this was just another thing that is really good to know. Like invoicing and all stuff like this. It's just, if you're going to survive as a freelancer, you need to know all these things. Otherwise, your business just isn't going to run well. I reckon if I was to do this again, I'd make sure that I'm finding specific examples that relate to me as well, in order to make the information that I'm relaying more useful to not just me, but to other people. And I've definitely learned a lot from this whole topic, since it's just a lot of useful information that will help me in the real world. Although, none of it was extremely practical. It's good to know theory behind everything.